So, John, I read your book and I'm so excited for this conversation today because I'm just fascinated with businesses. I'm fascinated with franchising, building business, building things like that. So, I think we're going to have an epic conversation. What do you think?
Love it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. All right. Let's jump in. Take a minute. Tell me about yourself and then we'll bounce from there.
Yeah, Jon Ostenson, based here in Atlanta, Georgia. We work with clients all across the country, but like so many of your listeners, I spent many years in the corporate world, and wanted to do something entrepreneurial. Didn't know what that looked like, and was very fortunate to kind of stumble into franchising. Had the opportunity to come in and serve as president of ShelfGenie franchise system and support owners from all different backgrounds all across the U.S. And for me, that was the light bulb moment that showed me this franchise model is really neat. And so really just have doubled down, and I've spun off from there, and I invest in franchises myself as a franchisee, sometimes with partners, but we've got good people running them, and allows me to spend most of my time helping other would-be entrepreneurs and investors all across the country get involved in franchising and better understand how it works, especially in what I call non-food franchising, so all these other industries outside of food.
Okay, so before I go any further, just define for those who don't know what non-food franchising is, and then I want to know what you find neat about it.
Yeah. So when I say the F word franchise, most people think fast food, right? And
Right.
so, I wrote a book called Non-Food Franchising, and just kind of
Mhm.
coined that term because there's this massive market out there of opportunities in other industries that oftentimes people don't have on their radar. So everything from home and property services to health and wellness to kids, pets, automotive, seniors, all these categories that are understandable, cash flowing type opportunities, and people oftentimes don't think of those within the franchising realm. Now, that being said, more and more people are, and I think the secret's getting out. But that's why I refer to as non-food.
Oh, okay. And what do you find neat about them
Yeah,
versus like maybe fast food
yeah. We
or
love the
food?
food. We love the food guys. We support them, and we definitely need them. But my humble belief is they're just easier ways to make money. Ways that
Mm.
maybe don't require the same capex investment, fewer employees, less operating hours, oftentimes higher margins because you're not dealing with food waste. And so again, we love the food guys, we need them, but these other industries, I think, pretend to be better opportunities for most of my clients.
Okay. Well, before we go any further, talk about what small steps in your personal life that you took that you didn't think was going to have big wins.
Yeah, I think the example of landing and franchising, had spent 10 years with a large corporation, was in consulting before that, had great experience, golden handcuffs, the stock options, all of that. But I felt like, I need to start taking some steps. And if I don't do it now, when will I do it? So in my mid 30s, I started having conversations out there in the market. And I'm a big believer that activity breeds activity. And so as I got
Mhm.
out there,
Mhm.
and oftentimes people were sent to me for networking purposes, there's a lot of good karma to be had. And yeah, it's kind of out of left field how the opportunity came open to step into a leadership role at Shelf Genie and quickly get up to speed and support owners. So small steps were just getting off the couch and getting active. And I oftentimes believe, and I've seen this in my career, when you start moving towards option A or option B, option C then comes out of left field. So I'm a big believer in getting active and taking small steps.
Did you have to work through limiting beliefs or fears or anything to overcome that get off the couch moment and move from inactivity to activity?
Absolutely. No, I think, I've always had a good self belief that, if I apply myself to something, I can make it happen. But, with a young family, you've got the corporate gig. That's what it's been a good run. Why leave something that's working, right? But kind of go back to what Kardashians say, YOLO, right? You only live once. And I don't want to, look back and, one day and say, I wish I'd taken a few more risks. And I'd rather say, hey, you know, I felt a prompting inside and I stepped into it. And for me personally, ever since I stepped away from the corporate world, I literally pinch myself every day. I just absolutely love what I do, and I love being able to help others, and I'm doing it on my terms.
What got you interested in the first place in helping others to do this, to find like the non-food franchises? And I guess that there's another question in there too. When people come to you, can you tell like what would qualify somebody that would make a good food franchisor and what would be somebody that you would say, "You know what? I think this might not be a good opportunity for you."
Yeah, no, I think that to what, you know, The way I think about it, I've been, around the water cooler for years in the corporate world and had conversations with people, and people, I was like, I've got that. I'm trying to find that great idea. I'd love to step away. I'd love to run my own business. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of
Mhm.
wannabe-preneurs, if you will. But what I saw in franchising was this is a way that to connect the dots and help you understand how to step into ownership. And then you've got this support system behind you, and you've got this amazing, playbook and lead generation machine, and oftentimes buying in bulk. And there's just a lot of benefits to being in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And so, I'm a big believer in the model, and not every franchise
Mhm.
system is created equal. There are good players and there are ones that aren't so good, just like any industry. That's where we come in and help our clients. And again, on the food side, we support the food guys. I think some of my clients have a passion for food and say we want to go down that path. If you're passionate about it, I'd say in most food concepts you are pretty hands-on running the day to
Yeah.
day to some degree, at least
Well,
early on. So someone's got to be willing to do that instead of just putting a manager in place. And I'm a big believer in food. The brand matters so much. You know,
oh,
I think it's
absolutely.
if you're investing this much, you've got to go with something that's truly proven. In a lot of
Yeah.
these other industries, brand isn't as important. I think about insulation. That's kind of a non-sexy industry. It's $50 billion a year in the U.S. Most people I talk
Wow.
to cannot even name an insulation brand. And so again, it's less about branding there, but the franchises that are doing very well in insulation come in and they've got proprietary product, and they've got a great lead
Mm.
generation machine, and they've got national partners, that provide leads to their clients and so or to their franchisees. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Oh, okay. What kind of characteristics then do you see common that people possess that make up a good candidate to want to go into non-food franchising?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say franchising is not right for everyone. There are some people that
Right.
are frankly too entrepreneurial and they want to put their thumbprints all over things, and they always think they're the smartest guy in the room. But for the ones that I think really do well, and I had this perspective when I was at ShelfGenie running the day-to-day operations, I got to see owners all across the US and figure out
Mm.
very clearly who is performing better than others, and who's middle of the pack, who's lower in the pack. And what I realized was it's not rocket science. One, the people that were the top performers were the ones that were good with people, or they hired people that were good with people. There's someone that people wanted to work for. They got along well with the franchisor, along well with their vendors and their clients. That's just business 101. But the second piece was their willingness to follow the system. If you're going to buy into a
Mm.
franchise, you've got to be willing to follow the system, or why are you buying into it, right? Why are you making that investment? And our best owners were the ones that follow the system most closely. And that sounds cliche, but it was so true.
You mentioned the word too entrepreneurial. What does that mean? Like, can you define that? I can't imagine what it means to be too entrepreneurial versus, you know, not.
Yeah, there's some people that just need to go out and start their own thing because they're never going to be pleased with what they step into. It's really
Okay.
interesting. A lot of our clients, I mean, I say a lot, it's probably a third of our clients already own a business that they started. They're an existing business owner. Some of those guys are too entrepreneurial. They come to us and they immediately start questioning, well, why don't they do it this way? Why don't they do it that way, within a given brand? And I have to tell them, hey, this is not going to be a good fit for you. If you're not willing to learn, willing to adjust. Now, a good franchisor is going to let them be innovative and try things,
I was
on
just
their own.
ready to ask that. Can you deviate a little bit? Because
100%.
I like to go into things and I will step into a good, well-run system. I like systems. I like processes. I think that's awesome. But every once in a while, I look at it and go, well, wait a minute. If you do X, if you change X to Y, you actually might improve that just a little bit better. And if we do, great. And maybe if it doesn't, I'm humble enough to say, all right, let's go back to what it was that
Yeah.
didn't work.
A good franchisor, and most of them are good. The ones we work with, certainly, they will let you go outside the lines a bit. I mean, you just can't go too
Mhm.
crazy, or can't do anything that's going to hurt the brand or hurt the system.
Yeah.
But they absolutely want you testing different things. And so, yeah, it's a partnership. It really is. If I've talked about existing business owners, some are too entrepreneurial. Most of them that work with us say love the fact that everything's been figured out for them. They love starting on third base instead of having to recreate the wheel. They've been there, done that. They know what goes into standing up a business and all the effort that goes in. And
Mhm.
they come in and say, gosh, if on day one, not only do I have a support system and a playbook, but they've already figured out the technology stack. They've already figured out what marketing works best in similar markets to my own. So I don't have to spend
Mhm.
as much. I can optimize my marketing day one. They've got a supply chain, whether it be for products or maybe it's outside vendors and services that can be tapped into. They're just they love coming in and they're like, hey, it's time to execute. And oftentimes what I see them
Mhm.
doing is taking one of their best employees from their current business and giving them the responsibility of leading this new business. And so it gives them a career pathway, which obviously they're able to attract better talent that way too.
Yeah, yeah. So thinking about small steps, big wins, if somebody wants to, suppose they have like a W-2 and they're like, okay, I think I want to come off my W-2 and now they're a good candidate. Let's just make the assumption that they're a good candidate for a non-food franchise and they want to come in. What is a time frame that somebody would look at and the first steps, say, that somebody would go through to go from start to finish in acquiring a food franchise,
Yeah.
non-food
No.
franchise?
It depends on where you want to jump in. I'd say pick up a copy of our book. It's an easy read. It's a little under
Mhm,
100,
it was.
pages, but we pack a lot of content in there. So it's really a good primer for you to kind of get the juices flowing around the types of businesses. How do you find the right
Mhm,
business? How does the funding work? How's the legal side work? All the different pieces. And so that would be a good first step, a small step. The next step would be, hey, let's get on a call and we'll get to know each other a little bit better. I'll hear more about your situation and what you're looking to do. And I can then come back and be very prescriptive and recommending, hey, here are the top 10 or so opportunities in your market
mm,
that if I'm in your shoes, I would want to be looking at. We've got a process that we've designed. It's very streamlined where we get those opportunities in front of you in a fast fashion. It's entirely free to work with us. I'm essentially a real estate broker, but for franchises. So it's a great model.
mhm,
But I'd say, those would be the first steps would be, and from a timeline standpoint, to get to your question, I'd say once we up a couple times and we review opportunities and you say, hey, here are three or four that I'm really interested in speaking with. We make those introductions. From the time that you speak with one of those brands to the time you're at the point of signing a franchise agreement, probably averages about 2 months, around
mm.
60 days. Some clients will move
Oh,
fast.
wow, that's faster than I thought it
Yeah.
would be. Yeah.
Some will
Huh,
move faster than that even. Some will take a little bit more time. But from that point, once you sign the franchise agreement, it's not that you're moving forward the very next day. It's, there's going to be some training. Obviously, if it's a brick and mortar franchise, a retail based one, then there's going to be some site selection that the franchisor
mhm.
helps with and build out. But if it's a service based business, oftentimes you can get that running within a couple months.
Oh, wow. Now, you mentioned that they're a brick and mortar. Are there franchises that are online or remote too? I
Yeah,
can't think of one off the top of my head that would be.
Yeah, quite a few that are remote,
Oh,
where
really?
they're more
Oh,
out in
okay.
the field. I'd say probably two-thirds of our clients are getting into things that don't require that customer-facing retail storefront.
Oh, yeah.
Just kind of going back to the examples, things like health or home and property services, everything from insulation to gutters to floor coatings. Those are all businesses that don't require a retail location. Now, over
Right.
time, you might have a subleased back end location where you keep some inventory or tools or what have you. But a lot of businesses, in-home senior care or what we call in-home healthcare, that's a good example. A lot of the
Oh.
kids-oriented businesses. We've had a bunch of clients getting into youth soccer. We've got a great opportunity there. There are different franchises that focus more on like training or coaching as well, that would all be remote,
Hmm. I never
non-retail.
even thought of that. Boy, that opens up a whole world because, first of all, it's easy to think of the food franchises. You think of McDonald's, you think of, okay, I've got a brick and mortar, Starbucks, whatever. But I never would have thought that you can actually franchise and have something that's remote. So that allows the owner also to have that mobility component to owning a business as well, which seems pretty exciting to some people if that's what you want.
Yeah, no.
So, yeah, it sounds really good. What are some myths, that you encounter around franchising now? But I'm just really going to assume we're talking about non-food franchising for the rest of our conversation. But what are some of the myths that you encounter around franchising, what you do?
Yeah, I think that franchisors can be smothering, that they can really be too hands-on at times. But I mean, that's not what we see out there. They're supportive, but they know their role and they're there, when you need them. I'd say, I think a lot of things come from the food side, where it's like you'll hear a story about McDonald's is requiring all their franchisees to spend X amount to upgrade every one of their locations. Well,
Mm,
all of that is spelled out in the franchise disclosure document, the FDD that every franchise system has, that you would review going in. You would know kind of what does the franchisor have the rights to do. But if you're a franchisor, you want to keep your franchisees happy. End of the day, having been a franchisor myself, if I implemented something and said, "Hey guys, we're all of a sudden going to do it this way, or you're going to start paying for this, and or you have to use this vendor," they would start talking and they would all get upset and they would come at me, and that made for pretty bad day on my end. So my
yeah,
goal was to
right.
keep them happy, keep them supported. Obviously, the better they do, the better I do. So I think just understanding that it is a partnership and that
Yeah,
alignment there. I'll also say, when you think about business ownership through franchising, oftentimes people think about just the cash flow side, but there's also
yeah,
the potential to sell that business down the road, oftentimes at a higher multiple than a non-franchise business in the same industry. There's been a lot of research around that. But you're also getting a third piece, and that's tax benefits. Unless, if you're a W 2 right now, you're not able to pay your kids to work in the business and let them then contribute to a Roth IRA. I mean, that's something that I do. You're not able to set up your own defined benefit plan. You're not able to write off the home office expenses and all these things that you can, obviously,
right.
as a business owner.
You mentioned W-2 people. Do you find, like, that there are possibilities for people who kinda like their W-2, but they also want the benefits of having a franchise? Is there a way that they can have a balance, and how do you see that work? Do you have an example of maybe somebody who might have that full-time W-2 and then invest in a franchise? Kind of what would that look like?
Oh yeah, no, we've got plenty of clients. I'd say half of our clients go that path.
Mm.
We work with a lot of doctors, lawyers, corporate folks that
Wow.
they want to keep their day job, at least keep it for a while, and yet they'll get a business going on the side and put a manager in place to support it. Now, I don't want to ever sugarcoat it. It takes work, especially in the early days, to stand up a business. That takes a lot of work, but it is doable within the world of franchising because you've got a franchisor on the sideline who has a support team that's supporting your manager. So most of your manager's day-to-day needs, they can go to the franchisor versus having to go to you. So it allows you to continue focusing on the W-2. Now,
Mm.
what's one of your biggest roles? It's making sure you've got someone good in that driver's seat, right? And so
Yeah, right.
obviously, if you don't, then you're going to have to lean in. But I've got clients that own as many as 6 or 7 different franchise brands, with all these different territories. They're not running each business themselves, but they've put good people in place and then
Yeah.
act more as an executive.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, well, that's good to know, actually, because you hear, like, out there, like Instagram, whatever, like you hear, okay, leave your W-2. Your W-2 is bad now. Let's go leave that. Let's go buy a business. Do it. That's the thing now. Let's go buy a business. Businesses are sexy to own. And so, but it's easy to say. It's not easy to, I get the impression it's not easy to do. Mm,
To,
and yeah, I
to,
mean, what
to
are
buy
your
an
thoughts on
existing.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah, to buy an existing business or go into it's like, yeah, go out and buy a business, and then the conversation stops right there. Doing what you do, where would you pick up the conversation from there
I have
to make it
countless clients that reach out to me and say, "Hey, I got caught up in the whole ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition movement, and the idea
Mhm.
of going out and buying an existing business that's already cash flowing, that's got the team in place and the market awareness."
A laundromat?
Yeah, a laundromat, for instance. A couple of thoughts, and this may not pertain as much to a laundromat, but most of those clients of mine end up purchasing a franchise at the end of the day for a few reasons. One, they never found a business that they really, resonated with, and the numbers checked out, and all the due diligence. And in a lot of cases, someone else is beating them to the punch. If it's a good opportunity, there's a lot of people looking, and so there's also risk. And people think that because it's already up and running, there's less risk. No, there's
Mhm.
risk whenever you have a change in ownership. You bring in a new owner, it's going to change the culture. You may lose some of the key people the very next day after the transaction. And here you
Mhm.
paid a multi for that business. A lot of them, once they realize how, they say, I'd rather start a franchise that where I'm in business for myself, but I've got a team behind me. I'm not paying a multiple on the business. I'd rather start it from scratch, bring a proven concept to my market. And then I want to be that one selling the business down the road,
Yeah,
instead of being the one buying. It is
makes
interesting
sense.
too. I think business listings have gone down. I was talking with a friend recently who usually has 90 business listings in the state of Georgia for his team.
Uh-huh.
They work on the sales side. Right now, they've got about 16. And that's because the,
Really?
the multiples have gone down as interest rates have gone up. So a lot of existing business
Oh.
owners are sitting on their businesses because they're not worth what they were a couple of years ago.
Oh, do you see a reversal coming in that? Well, first of all, what's the problem that's created when you only have so many businesses? You go from 90 down to 16. Is that I would think that's a problem, yes?
Yeah, for certainly for his team, they've got less
Yeah,
activity,
right.
right? But I'd say he was telling me that's what they're seeing across the market in general. And it's because these business owners a couple of years ago were told that their business was worth X amount. Well, now a couple of years
Um,
later, because the interest rates are so high that those buyers can't afford as much business, can't afford to
oh,
buy
okay.
as expensive. So they've had to bring the prices down. So therefore, a lot of people are sitting on their existing businesses. Eventually, interest
Um,
rates, will probably go down some. I mean, and that's the $1 million question these days, right? As to when it
yeah, right.
happens. But right now, that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, is that systemic across the country or is that just local?
I believe it's fairly systemic. That being said, on the
Right.
franchise front, because you're able to get loans a lot more easily,
Oh, okay, because it's a proven method.
exactly. So
Gotcha.
banks and institutions typically allow for SBA lending at a much higher rate on the franchise front. So we're seeing more interest than we've ever seen. Our biggest
I was
challenge is good opportunities move fast in good markets like Greenville, where you are. That's a hot market right now. I love South Carolina. We probably had a dozen clients in the past 12 months purchased in South Carolina. It's just a lot of great
Oh,
activity
wow.
from Charleston to Columbia to Greenville.
Yeah, yeah, Columbia's great because the university is down there. I kinda find that I like universities, they tend to be a little more vibrant, and they have a lot of more activity, than just maybe somewhere else, but a lot of fun nonetheless. So you are a franchise broker. Talk about an advantage of using you versus, say, maybe I just go out and I find Joe who's selling his business and I'm just going to go buy it from Joe. Talk about the difference between and advantages, disadvantages.
Yeah, certainly. Well, and if you're interested in franchising, if you go directly to a franchise brand or if you work through us, you're going to pay the same franchise fee. So it's a nice, clean
Mhm.
model in that it's entirely free to work with us. What we bring to the table would be a lot of insights. Again, I've been a franchisor. I've seen what works best. I've gotten to know a lot of people. I've been a franchisee myself. I own multiple brands from Florida down to Minneapolis, a couple of here in Atlanta as well. So, I can bring that experience to the table and also share with you, hey, because we do more placements than anybody else in the country, I'm able to see
Mm,
firsthand why different backgrounds resonate with different types of opportunities. And so when I'm curating that grouping of, hey, if I'm in your shoes, here are the 10 I want to be looking at in your market, there's a lot of thought that goes into that. And I'm able to share, hey, this one may only show 15 locations today when you look at the website, but there's actually 50 more locations that are in the process of opening right now. You don't have visibility into. We just have those franchisor relationships on the
mhm.
back end where we get that visibility that most people don't.
In your book, like I said, I really enjoyed reading because for me, not having a real deep background knowledge on non-food franchising, I just gained so much more information from reading it. So, one of the things you talk about is begin with the end in mind. How do you help people figure that? First of all, explain what you mean by that, and how do you help people work through that process of beginning with the end in mind?
Yeah, well, Stephen Covey definitely coined the term, but the idea is where do you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What steps do we need to take? What small steps that lead to those big wins do we need to take today? And oftentimes clients say, "Hey, I like the idea of building out a portfolio. I'm invested in Airbnbs. A lot of our clients invest in real estate or maybe long-term
Mhm.
rentals, but they like the idea of, in addition to that passive income, having an active income that they can write expenses off against, on this side through business ownership. But they say, hey, I don't know what types of businesses I want to have, but it's like, let's just start with one that is pretty predictable, cash flowing. You're going to learn so much through that first experience that you're going to be able to build on that. It's going to help inform your insights into what you're looking for those future businesses. And so I just kind of help create a roadmap for them. Hey, you want to keep your job? Let's put a manager in place. Once it gets to 3 locations, then maybe it's time for you to move into the business, or maybe you move on to the next brand, bring in another business. So we kind of put
Mhm.
together a little bit of a roadmap, just understanding where they want to be and then what they can do today to help get there.
Okay. So, how do you help people then find and select the right franchise then for what they're looking for?
Yeah.
Like, where would you start?
Yeah.
How would you know where to start?
Yeah. Well, I personally, there are about 4,000 franchise brands in the US. If you
Oh my god.
cut out the food brands and the hotel brands, which is about half the
Now
market.
that's overwhelming.
Well,
Like,
if you
where
cut
do
it,
you start?
yeah, if you cut out food and hotels, that brings you down to call it 2,000 or so, roughly, about
Okay.
half the market. Some of those are already sold out across the country, so they're not worth
Mhm.
talking to. Some are not in expansion mode for whatever reason. But when you look at those that are in expansion mode that have room to expand into, we work with about 600 of those that are kind of in growth mode. And but that being said, at any given time, there's probably 50 or 60 that I feel are strongest about looking at their financial models, their competitive advantages within their industry, looking at their leadership teams. That's a big piece to me. I want to see
Mm,
industry experience and franchise experience on that team. We're looking at what are current owners saying about their experience. So again, we have all this intelligence and knowledge and a lot of systems around it that we're
mhm.
then able to say, all right, so you're interested, they're in Greenville. We get on the call. We have a couple discussions around.
Let's pretend. Yeah, let's pretend for a minute. I'm from Philadelphia, so Philly Soft Pretzel Company is a big franchise that's up there in that area, and I think there's only one located in the state of South Carolina, and that's in Columbia, because I found them down there. And I come to
Yeah.
you and I'm like, "Okay, John, I think it'd be great to put a Philly soft pretzel place down here." What what
We
what would it look like? Yeah.
Yeah, we would discuss, the business and, if that's one that can, jump to a southern market like this, it's a little more rural, like you were saying, and kind of talk about that and maybe some case studies of other examples. But I'd probably say, hey, what are some of the things you like about the opportunity? You would share those
Mm,
characteristics with me. I'd say, well, there are a couple others I think maybe worth looking at. And here's the fun part, Sue, is probably 90% of our clients end up purchasing something that was never on their radar. So once we
yeah.
understand what they want the day to day to look like, what they're looking to invest, and we look at what's available in the market and what's resonating with other clients with similar backgrounds. Again, you're able to curate a really fine small group of opportunities that I'm not going to read your mind. I'm going to give you 10 or
Right.
so to choose from, but oftentimes it's one that you end up having never thought about prior.
Yeah. What's the retention rate of people who start their franchises and they're like, "Yep, I'm gonna stay with this." They pick it and, they're happy with what they've done.
Yeah, certainly we know the stats around small businesses and how many of those
Mhm.
succeed.
That's why I'm asking.
It's very few. There's data out there from different sources to show that, about 90% of franchises are still in business after 5 years. I'm not
Hmm.
a big believer in the data because I think it's extrapolated from few different places. But
Sure.
I will say directionally speaking that franchises are much more successful than non-franchises for all the reasons that we outlined on this call, and a much higher rate of success. Does it work out for everybody? No. Out of the 80 clients that I placed last year, I know of two that are no longer in business. It was less about the franchise system. It was more about the individual not being willing to follow the franchise system. And
I was
so,
just ready to say if you could talk about like because there's a lot you can learn from failure and there's a lot that you can learn from things that don't work out. So what do you see? So you said in those cases it was more the people, not necessarily the franchise. What was it about them if you could talk into that why it failed?
yeah, I talked with the franchisor of one of them and I said, hey, is there anything we can do to help support, Joe, we'll call him, he tells me that he's struggling and may not make it. The franchisor said, we have coached him. We have flown down there. We've met with his team. We've done this
Oh
and that.
wow.
We have done everything. He's like, John, he just won't listen. He won't follow any feedback that we share. And it's
Oh,
like, and then I've got a number of other clients that have been successful with that same franchise system. And it's like, all right,
okay.
the math says it's the individual, right? So I'd say again, following the system, and there's going to, even if you do that, there's going to be a point. It's just what happens when you start a business. There's going to be a point where you start second guessing yourself. The walls start closing in a little bit. You start feeling these different emotions and you just have to push through it. And most people can do that, but there's some that really start struggling and, you know, during that period. But that's the case for every single business. There's going to be a period
Mm.
where you've got to grind your teeth, push through it, and get to the other side.
Do you find the people that you work with are more in the risk-taking realm versus, conservative, or have you seen a spectrum?
Yeah, I'd say
No?
probably more conservative. Sometimes I joke that franchising is like having training wheels, on a bike, and some guardrails there. And so I'd say we probably work with people that are a little more risk averse, as a natural
Yeah.
tendency versus the general population. Granted, they
Well,
have,
that would make sense. That would make sense because franchising has a playbook. You're not
yeah.
going in and you don't have to make all this stuff up from scratch. So that makes sense.
And here's another paradigm. People think about stepping out, starting a franchise. Oh, that's risky. I'd rather keep my W-2 job. Well, gosh, if I'm running a franchise, I'm doing it on my terms. I'm not reporting into anyone.
Mhm.
W-2, you're at the whim of your employer, right?
Now, let's talk about numbers because as we keep talking here, I think the first question that comes to my mind is what does somebody need money-wise in order to walk into franchising?
Yeah. Certainly we have clients that are getting involved in seven-figure deals from time to time, but most of our clients, when you look at the franchise fee plus the startup cost plus a couple of months of working capital built in, it's kind of your all-in investment range. I'd say
Mhm.
oftentimes it's in the 150 to 300 range, 150,000 to 300,000. That's where most of them are falling. Some of our clients are using cash to fund it. Most of them are using cash plus an SBA loan. That's
Okay.
very, very common. Some are using an old retirement plan, 401k or
Mm,
IRA, and rolling that over, purchasing the business. You have to set it up as a C corp. It's what we call the ROBS program, but you get the tax benefits around that. Certainly, some are using HELOCs or other means, but that's kind of a good
mm.
range. I'd say 150 to
Oh, okay.
300 is where a lot of things fall.
Wow, that's not a whole lot because if you can get a SBA loan on top of that and then maybe throw some cash on it to get started. That's really not that bad. And then about how long do you see that play out? Or maybe you might not be able to answer that. So if you're getting a loan on that, how long does it take typically maybe for somebody to pay that off? Let's go with I took out a loan for 200.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on
Just
the person,
depends.
depends on
Yeah,
the
I was gonna
franchise
say.
system. If it's a brick and mortar retail customer facing business, there's going to be some site selection and build out. So it depends on when you
Sure.
start the clock. But I'd say on a service based business, which again is probably 2/3 of what we do. I mean, there are businesses that can be positive cash flow, in as little as 3 months. I always tell my
Mhm.
clients, let's go conservative and assume 6 to 9 months. But quite a
Mhm.
few that in that 3 to 6 month range turn into a monthly positive P&L, and
Mhm.
then you can start applying that towards paying back the loan. I mean, most people keep their SBA loans for a while, but they can be paid back early, and so there are situations where you could have the cash if you allocate it that direction to pay it
Mhm.
back. Year or two down the road. Probably more like 2 years down the road. But the interest you pay on that SBA loan is an expense, right? You can deduct it
Right.
from your
Right.
income, so a lot of times people will hang on to it.
Yeah. If somebody's looking to replace their W-2 income, is going the franchise model, viable if they wanna
Absolutely.
do that? Yeah.
Absolutely. Everyone's situation is different. Some have a spouse
Sure.
that's working as well that they, allows for that. It makes the transition easier. In some cases, they've had some savings and they say, hey, I'm okay kind of going without an income for the next 6 months, let's say. You know, in most cases, you're not going to hit what you're making in your W 2 in that very first year of business ownership. There's a ramp up time. You'll probably be running at that rate by the end of year one, but you won't have done it for the full year. So, but again, and not to belabor the point, I feel like I've said this several times, but you are
Yeah.
able to get tax deductions. The tax code's written in
Right.
favor of business owners. So it's not apples to oranges if you're making 250,000 all in, in the corporate world, but now you're making, 150, in your first year in franchising.
Yeah.
You're also getting a lot of tax deductions as
Yeah.
well. And you're
I guess the better question is, do you help people run the numbers based on their situation? Like if I came to you and say, okay, John, like I want to buy this business. I want to run it for 6 months. I want to stay in my W-2, but I want to run it to the point where it eventually the business makes money so that it makes more than what I'm making my W-2. Do you at least help somebody walk through that math so that they have an idea what they're going into? I guess that's the
Yeah.
better question. That's the better
I wouldn't
question.
say that I walked them through that piece. The franchisor
Or
walked.
somebody can.
Yeah, the franchisor, they have a call called unit economics where they take them through building out a pro forma and what they see with their other franchisees. And so you have a lot of assumptions to kind of play with. But I will
Mhm,
speak directionally to it. And sometimes I'll review it with my client. But I'd say probably a little more of the heavy lifting's done on the franchisor side. I talk more around, hey, let's have a base case and a more conservative case and what's the worst possible scenario case and our best case. And so we'll talk more about what those look like and how to make
mhm.
assumptions just based on my experience and what I've seen. But I'd say the franchisor is a little more in the details.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but they can get the details. I guess that was my
Yeah.
point.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's always good. What was the one thing you thought would be hard about acquiring a franchise but wasn't, and one thing that you thought would be easy turned out being harder than you thought?
Well, I'd say, a lot of people do think that, hey, if I buy into a franchise, everything's done for me. No, it still takes a lot of work. A lot of things are done for you, but there's still a lot of effort that goes in. So I'd say that can be a surprise to people. May have been a surprise to me at first. I don't remember. It's been a while, but something that on the flip side that I thought would be hard, but ended up being easy. I think, we oftentimes talk about that franchisor supporting you from the sideline. You've got this other group of franchisees all across the country, and they're not in competition with you. I'd say that was a big eye opener to me is just how supportive that community is. You've got
Mm,
other owners living the same thing day in, day out. And oftentimes you're getting on calls with them or as a group, and you're able to exchange best practices and learnings. Hey, where did you find your best employees? What's working for you on the marketing front? And so you're able to kind of create a baseline and create some comparisons that provide some healthy competition in a way. Where you want to win the award, but it kind of spurs everyone to move forward. And I've just been very pleasantly surprised, I'd say, from where I came from, just to see the collaboration across franchisees and these different systems.
okay. All right. That's cool. What's something that very few people agree with you on? And it can be whatever.
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know if I've ever been asked it quite like that. I'll say this: I interact with a lot of business owners. I'm a part of the Entrepreneurs Organization, EO, and other
Mhm.
groups, and I love doing that. The conversations with business owners are just different, right? Than I think
Yeah.
you would agree. For my wife and I, in our family, I feel a heavy calling towards stewarding what we've earned and what's been given to us. I feel like there have been a lot of blessings, and so and for us, giving and how we allocate, is very important. And I'd say that's not a conversation that I see as often out there. So there's probably
Mm,
disagreement. A lot of business owners would say, hey, they have maybe more of a scarcity mentality that I've got to hold on to this tightly, and it's all for our own empire. Whereas to me, I've kind of got a broader perspective, and
mhm.
I'm not perfect in that regard, but I'd say that is something that's important to us that others would disagree on. Is I believe that we need to bless the communities around us.
If you could go back in time to your younger self and deliver a message, what would it be and why?
Yeah. I'm grateful for the experiences I had in the corporate world over those many years. So many experiences, the international travel, the exposure to senior leadership. I learned so much, but I would have made the jump sooner. And
Mm.
like I said, I pinch myself every day. I love living life on my terms. And when I hear someone refer to their boss, you know, I, I cringe almost. I'm just like that. That's
Well,
such a previous
what
life
are
for
some
me.
of the things you love about what you do?
Yeah. Well, I'll say I'm the hardest boss I've ever had. So I live life on my terms, but I push myself harder than any boss ever has. But the
How
upside,
so?
I'll be in my office sometimes at 6 a.m., working, but then that's so that I can go spend time with my kids when they get home at 3 o'clock. Or, you know, my wife and I yesterday spent all day up at our mountain house meeting with contractors. I didn't have to ask anyone's permission. I just scheduled it in my calendar. And so again, I'm in charge of the calendar. I'm in charge of the vacations or where I work. Again, that remote idea. So those are some of the things that I appreciate probably more because of having spent so many years with the commute in traffic, to a big corporate
Mhm.
employer, hoping for that bonus. Here, I eat what I kill, and
That
there's so much upside. And yeah, I loved last week. Last week, I popped down to Delray, Florida. I've got a franchise down there. I popped in to hang out with them for 2 or 3 hours, and then I flew back same day. I enjoy doing that.
Cool.
Go down there
Yeah,
and
sounds like
encourage
fun.
the team. Yeah. So, you
Yeah.
can just kind of
How many franchises do you have then?
lose count sometimes. I believe technically I'm at 5, but we're in the process of sharing. I'm selling some equity in one of them. So I'll be at 4 very soon.
How do you keep track of all of them then?
Yeah.
Like, I kinda think of, like, you're running all these businesses, but you're not. So how do you juggle all those plates?
In most cases, I have partners and they're more on the operating side.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I won't pretend that I'm running all of them on a daily basis, but I do check in on the numbers on a daily basis.
What's the difference then between having you said you have partners then, so what's the difference between somebody just a solo person like me, maybe not having a partner, and then you having a partner to buy a franchise? What are the differences?
Yeah, I think for me,
Like,
just because
pros, cons?
I enjoy doing the consulting side. I
Mm,
wanted to preserve that, and so when I've entered into these franchise agreements, I usually have a partner with me. But most of our clients don't have a partner. You'll have a lot of couples, you'll have a lot of individuals. That's definitely the majority. So I'm a little bit of the minority in that case. But you do have some partnerships as well, and you just have to make sure that all the expectations are aligned and set going in. Who does what, so that
mhm.
you're on the same page. Because I've had bad partnerships. I've had a lot of good ones, but I've had some bad ones. That a whole lot of learnings came out of those.
What kinda learnings? What are some nuggets of wisdom you could share out of bad partnerships?
Yeah, I'd say trust but verify. There was a guy that I knew for a long time, and I still have a lot of respect for him. But we entered into a partnership with a third guy that was going to be our operating partner. He had a technology background, and end of the day, he was reporting on revenue numbers but not profit numbers, and we weren't in tune enough to ask, hey, he spoke directionally, but we weren't taking a hard look at the bottom line numbers for the first 6 months of the business. And all of a sudden,
Mm.
we found ourselves in a hole, and he was spending a lot of marketing that wasn't effective. And we weren't asking the tough questions early on. So I'd say trust but verify would be my biggest one.
Mm, okay. All right. So there's three questions I ask everybody. One is, can you share a book or resource other than yours that has had a significant impact on you?
Yeah. I would be surprised if this one hasn't been mentioned before, but The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Oh,
It totally aligns with
right.
what you do with your small steps and big wins. The compound effect, it's all about the little things that you do on a daily basis that add up, whether it be for your health, whether it be in your business, whether it be for your relationships, all facets of life. It's those small things, and it's the consistency behind them that has that compounding effect over time.
What are some small things you do each day for yourself, either in your business or personally, that help give you big results?
Yeah, there are days that the deals I thought were going to happen didn't happen, but I have to remind myself that, hey, there's a pretty good track record. If you keep blocking and tackling and putting one foot in front of another, then the lagging KPIs happen. It's all about building on those leading indicators. But I'd say, relationally, it's, 3 young kids. It's easy to not spend the time with them, but you only have them under your roof for a certain period of time. And so it's making those
Mhm.
investments on a daily basis to have that effect over time, in which you build a relationship where they want to hang out with you even when they don't have to down the road, right? That's kind of what you're
Yeah.
working towards. But I'm big on the health side too. So there's just a lot of things I do, working out with a trainer or doing the sauna or supplements or getting the sleep that I need so I can
Mhm.
perform best really in all those other areas.
Yeah, I can relate to the kids, but mine are in their 20s. And and I didn't have the small steps mentality when I was a mom and they were younger, but it goes really fast. But it's just a compounding effect of these little things that you do day in and day out with your kids that do come back. I have to say, when they're older, they're like, oh, wow, you said that and I taught you that when you were a kid. So some of that stuff does stick. Now, next question I love to ask, and if it makes us go down a rabbit hole, I don't really care. So it's one of my favorite questions ever. What's one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
Yeah, great question. I'd say just maybe the overall landscape of what we're seeing out there. And I briefly touched on it, that we're seeing a lot of interest out there in franchising, but I think understanding the why behind that. Why is
Mm,
there so much interest? And to
mhm,
expound on that, I'd say, it's an interesting dynamic. We had COVID a couple of years ago. I still think that there are many that, at that time they invested thinking about, what path am I on and what do I want to do with my life? And, some are still coming to that realization. But I think that's one reason We're also seeing a lot of cash on the sidelines where people maybe aren't putting it into the markets. A lot of real estate investors don't have a lot of good options out there, so they're coming to franchising.
Mhm.
So it's just a lot of kind of macro trends. But then obviously, I think in the political environment too, I think there's a lot going on, whether it be the wars overseas, and you have a little sense of being out of control. Think
Mhm.
people with their investments and with their career, they like the idea of having a little more control. So that's something that
Mhm.
business ownership and definitely through franchising, it can really add to you. So I'd say it's an effect, and I think the word's just getting out there that the franchising
Yeah.
does provide that better path to business ownership, as I like to say.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think it has something to do also with all the, like, the hype around just buying a business, buy a boring business?
Yeah, there are a lot of
And so
talking heads out there. I mean, I've got Wall Street guys
yeah.
that are buying non-sexy businesses. I just had a doctor in Connecticut last week that bought into a water mitigation restoration business. Things
Oh, cool.
that they're always going to be needed, but they're not sexy. And people,
Yeah.
non-sexy is the new sexy, I like to say.
Something that is just tried true. As we close, John, what is one small step that someone can do today that's gonna help them change their tomorrow?
Yeah, if you've enjoyed the conversation, I'd say come out to our website, frambridgeconsulting.com, and download a free copy of our book. And just share your email address. We'll get a free digital copy over to you. And just based on the feedback that we've gotten from so many similar, listeners and followers, I think that could really get the juices flowing to show you, hey, is this a path you want to explore? And that could lead to a very big win.
All right, perfect. Thanks, John. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, franbridgeconsulting.com. Certainly follow us on LinkedIn as well. I stay pretty active putting content out. But yeah, if you come out to our website, share your email. We'll get the book to you and we'll get you on our newsletter list as well, where we put out some great content. And if I can ever help and you want to take next steps, I'll help you find that big
Perfect.
win.
All right. It sounds great. Game on. Well, John, thank you so much for the gift of your time. I'm very appreciative.
Enjoy to see you. Thank you.